Hello, hello. This is Fake the Nation, a podcast that takes news, culture, and gossip, mixes them in a Fake the Nation stew where they become juicy, tender, and dare I say, enjoyable. I'm your host and chief conversationalist, Negin Farsad, and this week we look at the possible comeback of protest music. We'll talk about what some other garbage that emanates from our dear leader and other recent political shenanigans, and finally, Kalshi and Poly Market and the betting on everything. Today, I'm joined by a professor of English at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, which has just classed up the podcast several 100% immediately. He's also host of the podcast Nerd from the Future. It's the first time he's been on Fake the Nation. Oh, and fun fact about Nerd from the Future, it's already got one season in the bank that you could just binge through, and a second season coming out in March. It is the excellent Ramzi Fawaz. Hey, Ramzi.
Hi, thanks for having me. What a pleasure.
Oh my God, so excited to be on with you. I was so excited that we managed to get you on this show.
Thank you.
We also have another panelist that's supposed to be on today's show, but they're having some sort of technical difficulty, and so while we'll deal with that, we're just going to get things going. And before we start the show, I just want to remind listeners that they can support the show at patreon.com/Negin Farsad. For as little as $1 a month, you support the show and you get nothing in return. That's how my Patreon works. But then at $4, you do get bonuses, bonus segments of the show, and then more bonus segments of the show at the at higher levels. There's a book and a mug, a t-shirt, whatever at other levels. So support the show at patreon.com/Negin Farsad. Because everything's gonna turn into independent media eventually. And all we can do is hope that these Patreons keep people like me alive. Oh my God. All right. Now let's get into the show with topic number one. Bad Bunny performed the halftime show at the Super Bowl last Sunday.
Incredible.
And if you'll recall, when that was originally announced, there was a furor. It was the point of no return. If Bad Bunny took the stage, that just meant that we were under a Latino law, which is like Sharia law, but with Latinos. Now, so far as I can tell, that didn't happen on Sunday night. Couple that with the many political statements made at the Grammys, including a big one from Bad Bunny himself by saying "Ice Out," and with the virality of Bruce Springsteen's song about Minneapolis. And I think something like an era of protest music seems afoot. Now, before we get into the protest music part of all of this, what do you let's just talk quickly about the Super Bowl performance, because it was I found it really unusual. I know you have some thoughts. Tell me, what do you think of Bad Bunny at the Super Bowl, from a political lens?
Honestly, I thought it was astonishing. Mm-hmm. A friend of mine said something this morning that was so beautiful. She said, "It is the first time in years that I woke up and being on the internet is fun." Yeah. Because what she saw on social media, on different websites, was an explosion of attempts to explain and understand all of the nuances of this event.
Yeah.
They built a Puerto Rican neighborhood that crosses multiple geopolitical spaces. Part of it is supposed to be in Puerto Rico. Part of it is supposed to feel like parts of Brooklyn, New York.
Yep.
Right? Parts of it are supposed to be it literally bridged in that small space. They created a mini architecture of this multiple continental spanning Latino cultural experience that does actually include everyone, because we hear that music, we eat that food, right? There was a criticism today of there were no white people in it. And I was like, it doesn't matter because we live in the same shared universe. So by the way, Gaga was in it, so that's absurd. But I think the idea that we live in a shared universe, and whatever is Latino culture is also experienced by the rest of us. I'm Arab American, and I'm not sitting there being there's no Arab Americans in this broadcast, and I can't believe it. I'm looking at it and thinking, oh my God, how fortunate I live in a multicultural society where some slice of this lived experience, I get to experience it too, and to be shared. And so what was so beautiful when I was online today was I was looking at all these Reddit posts where many viewers were saying, genuinely not trying to be offensive, but I love the show, but I didn't really understand the language. I'm wondering if people could explain it. And you saw all of these people responding and saying, here's what this moment meant. You know, the nail salon and the guy selling, jewelry. This speaks to the fact that in Puerto Rico, many people live in poverty and they have to create small businesses to make money. The power lines, the electrical poles refers to all of the natural disasters that have ruined the electrical grid in Puerto Rico. Like the fact that it created a conversation where people wanted to understand, and so many others, whether Latino or not, who had the cultural knowledge to explain it, felt excited to explain it. While at the same time, even if you understand none of it, it's so fucking fun.
Oh yeah, it's so fucking fun. It's interesting because I live in the Lower East Side of New York City, and so I walk through the Bad Bunny set multiple times a week.
That's incredible.
And it's funny because I was just sort of like I once I was in Boston not too long ago doing a piece about Boston for Far Magazine, and when you're in Chinatown in Boston, the Greenway stops at Chinatown. There's all this sort of like cultural space along the Greenway, and it shifts as you change neighborhoods. And in the Chinatown part of it, it's like it feels like the Chinese version of this Bad Bunny set, right? Where there's like there's like men playing cards and dominoes and chess or whatever, but they're Chinese men or whatever. And it's funny because it's like, it's not just that like this is about Puerto Rico and the pride of being Puerto Rican. It is about sort of like what happens when groups come to America.
Exactly.
And it felt so very familiar from all of the places that I traveled to as a stand-up comedian, from all the immigrant, and even like talk about your people. Like I've spent some time in Dearborn, Michigan, right? Where you'll have pockets of like this, but the Arab version, right?
Yeah.
And
that's how I felt. Yeah. Sorry. That's how I felt when I was in London. You know, I talk a lot on my podcast about having taught study abroad last year. What a great privilege to be able to go teach study abroad, to take a group of American students from a Midwestern public university to one of the most cosmopolitan cities in the world. And precisely, in a deep irony, precisely because London is the seat of global imperialism, right? Like it was the beginning of a certain kind of global white supremacist vision of taking over the world. Well, one of the outcomes was that millions of people left their homes and came to London. And the city became unbelievably diverse and cosmopolitan. And you go to certain parts of East London and everyone is speaking Arabic and everybody is speaking Bangladeshi and everybody, like, it's unbelievable the variety of languages. Like you said, you go to Chinatown in the middle of Soho and it is like entering another world that is also connected to all the other little worlds in London. So there is this deep sense of interconnection between all of the different communities. And each neighborhood has its own flavor, but it's not completely cut off from the rest of the world. I think like if you watched the Bad Bunny broadcast and thought, but I'm not included, like I don't think the problem is in the show.
Yeah.
Right? Like the problem is in your inability to see yourself in the vast range of human experience.
Yeah.
Like, right? Like that's a problem.
And also I'll point out too that, you know, like one of the little tiny little political moments again, where, you know, what I wanted us to get at was the kind of resurgence of protest music. Yeah. And you don't think of Bad Bunny as being in the lineage of Bob Dylan, but I'm making the case, right? And one of those little visual cues for that was sort of like he had the dance pairings, like salsa kind of dance pairings. And some of those were same-sex pairings, which is a little bit of a nod of like, motherfuckers, this is a big tent. This is a huge party, and everyone is invited to this party, which feels like the kind of, you know, this kind of modern form of like making a statement, and also making it fun, because I got to be honest, I wouldn't dance much to Bob Dylan tunes. You know, so this feels like a kind of like, you know, a reinvention of all of that. To shift gears a little bit, what do you now? The Grammys happened a couple weeks ago, and there was a lot of like, you know, keep ice out and stuff like that, statements from the stage. what do you feel about like kind of these huge celebrities using that platform to make political statements? We kind of maybe saw a little bit of a backlash of that in 2024, that so many celebrities were pro Kamala.
I'm
but it
so
didn't
glad
help.
you asked me about this. They can say whatever they want. That is what free speech is. I am a professor who thinks about politics all day long. I do not expect that my celebrities in this country are going to have as equivalently sophisticated, complex. I'm a professor who spends my entire life thinking about American cultural politics. And I have been working for years to refine my thinking and what I say about it, et cetera. I do not expect celebrities to be the most sophisticated political thinkers of our society. Would I like them to be? Yes. They're on movie sets. They're traveling the world. I am delighted that some of them, and there should be more of them, want to use their platform to be able to get ideas out and messages out. And I don't expect every one of those messages to be absolutely precise and genius and brilliant. I expect it to galvanize human beings to actually offer more nuanced and interesting and compelling claims. And this idea that you can lift someone up on a pedestal for their art and then say, but fuck you, when you're actually a human being with ideas and thoughts and feelings and that you have a position, is truly absurd. And at the end of the day, you don't have to like what they say. You also don't have to annihilate them in public.
Right.
There's nothing controversial. Absolutely. I really want to stress this. Like, zero controversial about saying this is stolen land. It is literally stolen land. That is a historical fact. And by the way, the steal happened over hundreds of years. Native and indigenous populations actually still dominated North America all the way to the end of the 19th century. It is a very recent idea that white people would actually dominate the geography of what we now call the United States. There's a great book about this called Native Nations, about how, like, up until the mid to late 19th century, 150 years ago, it was not at all obvious that white people would own all of this. That is an accident of history. So I think, like, the idea of making these things controversial is sort of a laugh to me. If you believe in free speech, if you believe in a society in which we have given people huge platforms, they can say what they want. And we should be more interested in making what they say more complicated, more fascinating, more interesting, and then let them be. Like, that's it.
We're talking about Bad Bunny. We're talking about this kind of like celebrities making statements and using their platforms. One other thing that's happened, I think, because of the occupation of Minneapolis is this, and it's been happening with artists like Jesse Wales on the internet, but like Bruce Springsteen got into the mix by putting out a protest song called The Streets of Minneapolis. And, I check out this video. I mean, it's not like this particular song is like generally not my vibe, but I wept watching the video.
Wow.
And I think, like, do you feel like this is there a moment, and you're around a lot of, I'm imagining, 18 to 22-year-olds who are going to be in charge of culture very soon. Do you feel like they're able to swallow the cringe and get on board with some good old-fashioned protest music?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. I mean, I'm teaching a class on AIDS activism right now, and we're doing a week about the intensities of activism. Like, what did it feel like to be a member of, let's say, the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power, and to be out in the street and getting arrested and watching your friends die in the late 80s? And one of the central elements of this is that every time they did a protest, they would go dancing and they would have sex. And they would get in their body and they would experience pleasure. And one of the things that drew people to the movement was getting back in their body. The idea that a society was telling you everything about you is disgusting, your form of sex and desire is disgusting, and now you have there's a disease that's circulating that makes that even more dangerous. To be able to respond to that with these amazing shows of pleasure, where you could negotiate safe sex with people that you were doing activism with, that's why people kept coming back every week. And I think if there's any reason why this generation has not felt a great deal of investment in participating in social movement activism is because people haven't been reminded that when you do that, you will make friends. You will get laid. You will be energized. Like the depression you're feeling, the ADHD that you struggle with, it will be rerouted because you will literally be reorganizing the chemicals in your brain around sociality. So one thing I do in that class is that every week when we start, I make them dance.
Oh,
so I say to them,
that.
I'm like, listen, if people can get together in public to do these huge protests, you can get up and dance for 5 minutes in class and you can be together and be embarrassed. Like, let yourself be embarrassed. And so I do think they want that. They just need to be like given the opportunity.
Yeah, I have just felt so strongly in the last few years that like this idea that things are cringe, we need to embrace the earnestness of optimism. We need to embrace the earnestness of patriotism. We need to release the cringe, get over it, and get on board. You know 100%. What I mean? If you fucking believe, like you don't need, like the cringe is a weight you do not need to carry with you. Fuck it.
Yes, you're talking about being moved.
Yeah,
you're talking about
moved.
The capacity to be moved. And if what we want is a world in which people cultivate the capacity, I don't even want to use the word empathy, to just believe that other people should not be obliterated. You have to be able to be moved by other people's existence and their humanity. And I often say to students, like, this is something I talk about in my classes all the time. Like the political philosopher Hannah Arendt would often say, the conservative right struggles from being under-identified with suffering. Like they are so distanced from the suffering of other people that they seem inhumane. But she says part of what happens on the left is that there's often an over-identification with the suffering of the oppressed. So that like I've seen a lot in Gen Z, less so in Gen Alpha, but more in Gen Z, this sense of like, oh my God, people are struggling here in Palestine, in Sudan, or whatever. And they become so over-identified with the suffering of people that are at a distance that they can't get any critical emotional distance enough to actually say, what is needed from me in this crisis? So I tell them you should be moved, but not also obliterated by the feelings. You need to be present for people and be able to act on their behalf.
Hallelujah, guys. That is, I sing it from the rooftops, and I'm so glad that you do with students.
All the time, honey.
Well. All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, there's more.